Hey guys, so Path of Exile 2 has brand new patch notes and the patch is currently live. And I just wanted to talk about my favorite things in these new patches, and I broke it down into 10 of my favorite things. The patch notes are extremely large with substantial changes, like much bigger than anyone thought they were. So if you want to check out the full list, I have a link in the description, but I just cherry picked a few things that I really liked about it. The first thing on my list is loot filter for console. Loot filter was the most requested feature for console, and it's really good to see grinding gear games be active and added to the game as quickly as possible. In the end game, playing without a loot filter became pretty much almost impossible for some players, especially when you're doing breaches when there's a billion items on the floor and they all look the same because exalted orbs and divine orbs look exactly the same as augment orbs. So now console players don't have to play at a disadvantage. Number 2 on my list, map area checkpoints for endgame maps. In order to clear a map in the endgame, you have to essentially kill all the rare monsters. But sometimes you don't know the entire layout of the map, you have to do a lot of backtracking trying to find these rares, and it can be quite frustrating having to spend quite a bit of time walking instead of actually fighting monsters and playing the game. They added in some checkpoints so the backtracking isn't as bad, so you can just get to where you need to get to kill these rares easier. I think it's just a really nice quality of life that really improves the game, because no one wants to spend time walking in a certain direction, kill a rare mob, only to realize that you have 3 rares on the complete opposite side of the map and you can't really do anything about it. So really happy about that change. Number 3, better mods and unique items. One of the biggest complaints I had about Path of Exile 2 is the fact that the uniques in the game just do not feel good. Most of them are either complete garbage, and they're 1 or 2 that are so OP that you have entire builds that basically build around them. So now the devs have seen this, because at the moment getting a rare with a couple of decent mods is significantly better than pretty much 99% of the uniques in the game. They're trying to make the uniques better, and especially for leveling, so you're not feeling like you're missing out on resistances or damage by picking up this unique, and you don't have to build around them. I think this is great. When you see unique pickup, you want to be excited about it. You want to actually try and use it and maybe incorporate it, because before you pretty much had to understand what the unique did before even trying it, because they are so specific for builds. So having a bit more to them means that more people are going to try them, and hopefully we get more build variety. Number 4 on my list, more portals for Pinnacle boss fights. I think this is a great addition. So essentially before, once you found a Pinnacle boss, you have 1 portal, you fight him once, you die, you lose the map, you have to find them all over again. And these are the toughest bosses in Path of Exile 2. The only problem with this is that because it's the hardest content in the game and you only get 1 try, you essentially got punished way too hard for even attempting it the first time. You pretty much either, there are basically 2 approaches to how people were doing this, or actually 3. You had people who were extremely good at the game getting there and destroying them. There are people who aren't as confident, and they would literally just sell the encounter on the trade website. And there are people who actually tried to do it and they die before learning anything about the boss, and they have to spend time farming and trying to find it again just to try and learn the moveset. With this system, what they're trying to do now is your first encounter, you have 6 portals, and the more you encounter the boss, the less portals you have, because you actually would have more experience with it. So when you're farming the Pinnacle content, it's actually a ramp up getting harder and harder, because by that point you should be learning the mechanics. And I think it's great. It's great for new players, especially new players like me who actually want to do this content and actually want to learn how to fight these bosses without necessarily looking at a guide. I want to go in, I want to die, I want to actually improve at playing the game, and I don't want to look at a guide for everything. So if you're like me, I think this is a great change, and the content gets on harder at a more progressive state. Number 5, different incentives for different maps. So when they were talking about the philosophy of what they wanted for Endgame and Path of Exile 2, they said that they wanted different maps to do different things. So, because currently in the game right now, you basically get the best maps are the big open maps, and they drop the most loot, and you essentially have big AoE moves that does a lot of damage. It covers the entire screen, so you can clear as much as possible as quickly as possible, and that's basically the meta of the game right now. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make it so that different maps have different rewards, because right now maps with a lot of tight corridors and windy spaces are pretty bad, because you essentially cannot clear as quickly and it takes longer to clear, and it's almost the same amount of loot, so you're essentially taking twice as long to complete it for the same rewards, so they're just considered bad maps. What they're trying to do now is that they're trying to add incentives to doing these maps, so they drop more gates, and I think they're also trying to make it so that big AoE blasters, that's not the only way to be efficient in the end game. At least that's what they're trying to do. That's what the game they're trying to make, and I'm actually pretty keen for that, because I don't want the only efficient way to play the game is to just big AoE screen clear. I'd like it so that there are different ways to do content for the end game, so I think this is a really great change. Number 6, improved visibility of citadels in Endgame Maps. This is also one focusing on the endgame, and I think this is a great change, because I think one of the biggest complaint by the broader community was how hard it was to find citadels, because essentially you didn't know where they were. There were no real signs to show how to get them, and people were playing pretty much hundreds of hours with only finding a handful. What they have essentially done is that they've made it so that the citadels now spawn a bit closer to the center of the maps, and you can also see a beam of light coming out of them in the fog of war, so you can actually path to them. This gives players a sense of actual direction and some purpose when they're pathing in the end game. It means players don't feel like they're just randomly clicking nodes, and there's actually some sort of sense of direction and purpose in the end game. The next one is actually my favorite change. This is number 7 on the list. Replacing socketed runes with new runes. This is huge. I absolutely love this change, because currently, well, last patch, once you essentially put in your runes on your item, on your weapon or piece of armor, you're essentially stuck with whatever runes that you have in there, so you can't really change your build. It really felt crap, honestly. I had one of my best weapons, I misclicked and put in a wrong rune and kind of semi-bricked bricked the item, so I didn't have my capped resistances the way I wanted it. I think the ability to just replace those socketed runes is great. You're not taking out the rune, you're just replacing them, so you don't get the rune back, but you're not completely locking in the item. Right now, there are a lot of players that are so afraid of locking in their runes onto their weapon that they don't even put in runes, because they just saving them, which I think is just, it's not great. So with this, if you have an abundance of runes, you get a lot of runes in the end game as well. You get an overabundance of them. You can actually start experimenting, and you can actually start just changing. You don't feel pressured, and you don't feel locked into something like this. And I think you still, as a player, still losing something. You don't just get to keep the runes and just recycle them. This rune drops are still important, but at least this way they're not just wasting away in your inventory because everyone's just too scared to use them. Massive change. Number 8 on my list is the various monster changes. I'm not going to get into super specifics because there's an entire section on the patch notes with monster changes, and it feels more than 30 changes to all the different monsters in the game. But essentially what I'm going to talk about is just the philosophy behind it. What they're essentially doing is that they're just making it so that the game doesn't feel like bullshit to play towards the end. Because currently a lot of times you die to stuff off screen, you get meteored from an enemy that you can't see. On death effects, sometimes things just explode, you can't see the explosion because the screen is cluttered and you die. What they're essentially doing is that they're tuning on a lot of these monsters, so the grenaders are doing less damage and they're not throwing as many grenades. You can't be meteored off screen. the void plants, which I think one of the more powerful enemies in the game. You can actually see the void a bit more clearly, also a bit more delayed to a lot of the undeath effects as well, so they're not blowing up in your face and you actually have time to leave the area before they detonate. So I think they're just trying to, this is just a nice adjustment so that you don't feel like you're being killed by bullshit, essentially. On number 9 on my list, I'm essentially calling it the fit through the gap bug fix. And why I'm calling it this is because previously in Path of Exile 2, a lot of the times you will be walking around, you see a nice gap when you're trying to clear monsters and the gap doesn't exist. Actually, it looks like your player and your character can walk through a space, but it actually isn't a space. You get baited, then you get surrounded by enemies and you die. This actually happens quite a lot in the game and it just feels weird. I've actually had it happen to me in Trial of the Secular as well, where I'm walking through, I'm trying to find a gap here. Oh no, it's not a real gap, it just looks like a gap, and I get cornered and I get flamethrowed to death. They're fixing this. They went through and they made a couple changes so that I think they said they're going to shrink the player character size. I'm not too sure what they actually like, the process behind of what they're going to do, but they're going to make it so that you don't get stuck on things quite as much. And another small note is that they've made it so that you can roll through more monsters, and when you roll, you push through more monsters as well. I think they're just trying to mitigate the player getting completely surrounded and just killed, because it's probably one of the main ways I've actually died doing endgame maps, and it really doesn't feel good when there's a gap. If there's a visual gap and I can see that my character's big enough to fit through that visual gap, I would like to fit through it. I don't want to be baited by an invisible wall, surrounded, and die. I'm really glad they're making this change. These things really improve the overall experience, and it makes it feel like you're not dying unfairly in the game. Number 10 on the list, and I really like this change as well, it is better rolls on gear. So what they've essentially said they're going to do is that they're going to make it so that items roll less dead stats, so less plus accuracy, plus mana, all that stuff on your gear. You're actually going to get more likely to get the good stuff, increased physical damage, increased attack speed, all the good stuff. It's really nice, because especially because how crafting works in the game right now, you have very limited control as to what you're rolling, because basically the main way to craft is by using your augments and your exalts, and you have absolutely no control as to what modifiers you're getting on your gear. So by increasing the likelihood that you get better things on your gear, it means you don't have to engage with trade nearly as much. It's probably going to really improve the solo self-fund guys as well. Currently, every single piece of gear that I have is something that I've bought, and I have not got anything to drop even remotely as close to what I can buy. Not even close. I really hope that with this change I can just get better rolls, you know what I mean, and we'll see how it is implemented. It could be but I think they're going in the right direction. Maybe when we get more options for crafting, these numbers could be tweaked, but for now I think it's the right decision. Okay, thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please give it a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. If you want to catch me live, I stream on Twitch at Cable G Corner at Twitch. Please leave your feedback in the comments, and if you want to tell me what your favorite thing about the new patch is, please leave it down below. See ya.